Here is a list of things that should kill any living creature instantly. Being heated past the boiling point of water. Being frozen to nearly minus 272 degrees Celsius, a hair above absolute zero, the coldest temperature physics allows. Being dried out completely for years. Being crushed under pressure 6 times greater than the bottom of the deepest ocean trench. Being blasted with hundreds of times the radiation that would be lethal to a human. And being thrown into the raw vacuum of space. No air, no pressure, exposed to the full radiation of the sun. Every single one of those should be a death sentence. There is one animal that has faced all of them and walked away alive. It's called the tardigrade, also known as the water bear, and it's smaller than a grain of sand. By the end of this video, you'll understand the almost magical trick it uses to cheat death and why it might just be the toughest, most durable form of life in the entire known universe. First, picture the animal itself, because it's strangely adorable for something so indestructible. Under a microscope, a tardigrade looks like a tiny, chubby, 8-legged bear, lumbering along on stubby legs tipped with little claws. That waddling, bear-like walk is why they got the nickname water bear, and the even cuter nickname moss piglet, because you often find them living in damp moss. They're tiny, usually half a millimeter or less, right at the edge of what your eye could catch as a speck. And they are everywhere. Tardigrades live in the deep sea, on Himalayan mountaintops, in Antarctic ice, in boiling hot springs, and almost certainly in a patch of moss or lichen near where you are right now. There are well over 1,000 known species. For most of their lives, they're not doing anything superhuman. They just creep around in films of water, eating algae and tiny organisms. Their incredible toughness only switches on when their world turns hostile. And that switch is the whole secret. So what's the trick? When a tardigrade's environment dries out or turns deadly, it doesn't fight the conditions. It essentially shuts itself down, almost completely. The tardigrade pulls in its legs, expels nearly all the water from its body, and curls into a tiny, dehydrated, barrel-shaped husk called a ton. In this state, its metabolism drops to as low as 0.01% of normal, sometimes seemingly to a complete stop. It is, for all practical purposes, not living and not dead. It's paused. This state is called cryptobiosis, hidden life. And here's the genuinely astonishing part. As the water leaves, the tardigrade replaces it with special protective molecules. It produces a sugar called trihulose and a set of unique proteins that, as the cell dries, turn into a kind of glass. They vitrify. The delicate machinery inside each cell gets locked in place, suspended in this glassy matrix, frozen in time and protected from damage. The tardigrade hasn't survived the harsh conditions in the normal sense. It has stepped outside of being alive until the danger passes. A husk of glass and sugar sitting in the dust isn't impressive on its own. The impossible part is what happens next. Add a single drop of water. Within minutes to hours, the glass dissolves, water floods back into the cells, the protective proteins release their grip, the metabolism flickers back on, the legs unfold, and the tardigrade simply walks away and gets on with its life as if nothing happened. And it can stay in that paused state for a staggering length of time. Tardigrades have been revived after years completely dried out. In one remarkable case, researchers revived tardigrades from a frozen moss sample that had been in storage for more than 30 years. Think about that. An animal can spend decades as inert dust, with essentially no working metabolism, and then resume life on contact with water. It blurs the line between alive and dead so badly that scientists genuinely argue about which side of that line a dried tardigrade is on. It is, in a real sense, suspended animation, the thing science fiction keeps promising us, already perfected by a half-millimeter animal in your backyard. Now for the headline. In 2007, scientists ran an experiment that sounds made up. They took living tardigrades, loaded them onto the outside of a spacecraft, launched them into orbit, and exposed them directly to open space, the hard vacuum, the extreme cold, and the unfiltered radiation of the sun, with no protection whatsoever. Then they brought them home. Many of the tardigrades survived. Some that were exposed to the full blast of solar radiation, the most lethal part, even survived that, and afterward were able to reproduce. This made the tardigrade the first animal known to survive direct exposure to outer space. Not inside a sealed capsule, exposed, naked, to the vacuum. The same trick that lets them survive a dried-out riverbed, that glassy, shut-down ton state, is exactly what lets them shrug off the void of space. To a tardigrade, the difference between a dry afternoon and the surface of a spacecraft in orbit is just a matter of degree. They were, in a sense, pre-adapted to survive a place no animal had ever evolved to go. There's one threat that should still get through, even in the ton state: radiation. Intense radiation shreds DNA, breaking the molecule that carries the instructions for life. It's how radiation kills, by destroying the genetic code inside your cells. Tardigrades laugh at doses that would be instantly fatal to us. Part of that is the dried-out ton state. With little water inside, radiation produces fewer of the damaging reactive molecules that normally do the harm. But scientists found something more. At least one tardigrade species produces a unique protein with a fitting name, Dsup, short for damage suppressor. This protein physically wraps around and shields the animal's DNA, like molecular armor, blunting the damage radiation would otherwise inflict. And here's where it stops being a fun fact and starts being important for us. When researchers inserted the gene for Dsup into human cells in the lab, those human cells became significantly more resistant to radiation damage. Sit with that. A protein from a microscopic water bear can help protect human DNA. That opens doors to protecting cancer patients during radiation therapy, shielding astronauts on long missions to Mars, and safeguarding people who work around radiation. The tardigrade isn't just surviving. It's holding a blueprint we want to borrow. Let's zoom out to the most sobering idea of all. Scientists have actually studied what it would take to wipe out every tardigrade on the planet, and the answer is deeply unsettling. The catastrophes we usually imagine ending life on Earth, a giant asteroid impact, a nearby exploding star, a gamma-ray burst, would be devastating to humanity and to most species. But studies suggest they would not be enough to sterilize the tardigrades. To kill them all, you would essentially have to boil the oceans away entirely, an event so extreme it's hard to imagine short of the sun itself dying and expanding billions of years from now. In other words, the tardigrade isn't just likely to survive the next mass extinction. It is plausibly one of the hardest forms of animal life to ever erase from this planet. Long after humanity is gone, through whatever end eventually comes, there will very probably still be tardigrades, drifting in moss and ice and sea, pausing and reviving, riding it out. So here's where we land. The tardigrade is more than a tough little animal. It's a demonstration that life can be far more durable than we ever imagined, that an organism can step outside of living itself, turn its body to glass, wait out the apocalypse, and walk away when conditions improve. It survives heat, cold, pressure, dehydration, radiation, and the vacuum of space, not by being strong, but by being able to pause. And buried in its biology are tools, like the Dsup protein, that we may one day use to protect ourselves. It may well be the last animal standing on Earth, the closing line of the entire story of life on this planet. Now, the tardigrade cheats death by pausing itself. But there's an animal that does something almost as impossible in the opposite direction. It doesn't pause when it's damaged. It rebuilds, regrowing its own limbs, its heart, even parts of its brain, from scratch, with no scar. If you haven't seen how the axolotl does it, that's the FactDrop deep dive to watch next. Because once you've met the animal that won't die and the animal that rebuilds itself, you start to realize nature has already solved problems we've barely begun to dream about.